Hello, everybody. Welcome back to FinOps Unfiltered. Today, we're actually going to be talking about something that is not brand new and is not AI. We're actually going to go back in time a little bit and talk about something that's kind of maybe a pretty fundamental thing when it comes to cost optimization in the cloud or the FinOps practice, et cetera. And that is the Azure Hybrid Use Benefit for Windows Server specifically, or AHB as it's also known. So what is that? AHB is basically a licensing right or grant that you get for a Windows Server license that is either under software assurance or is bought under a subscription program like the CSP program. What it allows you to do is basically utilize that license to cover an installation of or a resource, a VM resource for Windows Server, and it reduces the cost of the Windows license. Basically, you're not paying for a Windows license within Azure because you have a license that you purchased outside of Azure. Now, the different editions have different rights. Data Center Edition allows you to cover both an on-prem installation, usually a host or a cluster situation, as well as an individual VM within Azure. A Standard Edition license allows you to utilize it in one place or another. So a lot of organizations that might have an EA, they might have data center on that EA because they have a large on-prem footprint still, and they have software assurance on those. Will begin to utilize Azure Hybrid Use Benefit. However, we see them do that in ways that may not be the most benefit to them. One is a lot of times they'll just think, okay, I've got all these data center licenses, I'll just apply them across the board. And that may get you into a situation where you're non-compliant with your licenses. You certainly don't want that. The other thing that we see organizations in that similar situation do is think, well, because of the non-compliance issue and because my Azure environment is so dynamic, machines are coming up and down quite a bit, I may not want to apply it at all just to avoid the risk. That's also not a good thing because ultimately, if you're using those licenses, those data center ones to cover on-prem, they're basically a free license in Azure for you now. So you can certainly take advantage of that. Some things to note about the requirements or the benefit that you get. One of the big things and the key things when it comes to tracking and managing is the fact that you actually are always using at least 8 cores to cover an Azure resource. So what that means is basically if you have a VM that is a 2-core VM, you still are utilizing 8 cores of licensing in order to cover that. So if you're in a situation where you have some data center licenses, you want to make sure that you're using them effectively and efficiently, covering 8-core machines first until you begin to get low or before you get low. If you're getting low, I would move those from a 2-core or 4-core into an 8-core, et cetera. The other thing that we'll see is a lot of organizations may utilize their data center licenses, kind of use them up in Azure, still have some machines left over or some resources left over in Azure, and think, okay, well, I'll just go ahead and continue to pay those in Azure. The reality is that a standard license subscription under CSP, you can do that annually. So you're not locking into 3 years like you are in some of the contracts like MPSA and EA. You can do it annually. It still costs a lot less in 90% of cases than buying that license or paying for that license within Azure. Now, you want to certainly be cognizant of machines that are maybe only running a few hours a day, doing that kind of work, or machines or workflows that may only be up for a couple of months. However, in general, we see that basically within 3 to 3.5 months, you're basically gotten to a point where you have paid for your license if you buy it through the CSP program and you buy a standard edition. Another thing to note with this or to be aware of is that B series machine licensing, the burstable stuff, costs a lot less in Azure than it does outside of Azure. So the basic rule of thumb, and this is not 100% applicable, but it's certainly a rule of thumb, is if I have a machine in Azure, I should probably buy a license for CSP for Windows Server Standard if I do not already have a license to use. And it will cost me a lot less in the long run for that licensing. Now, if it's a B series machine, I would not necessarily do that willy-nilly, but for most other machine sizes and versions, buying a CSP license is absolutely the right way to go. Again, some things when it comes to the number of hours that it's up or how long that workflow is going to be in production may change that. But the key takeaway that we want to look at here is basically using your AHB effectively and efficiently. We go through this with a lot of organizations, and we see really, really significant savings when it comes to utilizing AHB effectively. But we also find some that are off, as I mentioned before, might be non-compliant in their licensing, and you want to make sure you shore that up. So taking AHB off of some of those machines, then go buying a license under CSP, and then reapplying. You're still getting significant savings in that effect. Anyway, this is something we review quite a bit with organizations. I'm going to leave a slide in a comment section here that has just a quick overview of it. But if you would like for us to take a review of your VM architecture, your licensing in general, and how to apply AHB effectively, we'd be happy to do that.